You're grinding every day. Long hours, no backup, no accountability. That ends now. The Empower Solopreneur Mastermind gives you one simple advantage: a weekly power session that turns isolation into domination. Every Friday morning on Zoom, you'll get real coaching and real feedback to make real moves. Join a group of driven professionals in a program designed for solopreneurs and people working at home. Stop getting stuck. Start scaling. Seats are limited. Lock in yours today at modernobserver.com/empower-mastermind.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. I'm Bill Corral, and I've got with me today my amazing friend in the arena of world empowerment, or maybe just a little bit of feeling better about yourself at different times. So if you're new to what we're doing here, this podcast is conversation that's pretty free form. In fact, we have no idea what we're going to talk about when we press the button to record. And sometimes I bet it sounds like we have no idea what we're going to talk about. But we usually get into some pretty interesting things that I think you're going to find at least something in the hour that's useful for you in particular, or maybe somebody that you love. So today, Jan, there's a lot going on. How many inches of snow did you get?
I think, I don't know. It's snowing again here. So last I heard, I think it was 15 or 16, but it's now coming down again, which is what they said. So I think they said we were going to get another few inches.
Isn't that exciting?
Well, I mean, I love it from the inside, and I went out and a few times yesterday. Today, this morning was a little bit better. My poor Tonka boy would not go outside yesterday. I mean, he was just not having it. He went out and he was like maybe out for 5 seconds. And I think he barely went to the bathroom all day. The poor guy, I was wondering how he was holding it, because I was there was no path outside for him to walk. And he was he's tall and long legged. I can't imagine having a small dog. And he was couldn't make it over the banks.
I can just picture him looking at you going, "Mommy, this is canine abuse right here," you know?
Right. This is just not happening, Mom. Just
Yeah,
not.
exactly. So anyway, I don't know if you can hear something a little bit different, but I am broadcasting today from my mobile studio. I am currently in a lovely little place called Spring Hill, Florida. And at the moment, no, it's not 75 and sunny and all that good stuff. At the moment, it's about 62, overcast. It's just a little bit of a spritz kind of a thing. But I'll tell you what, it's good to be alive today. You know, this is a good day to have a good day, right? So on top of the weather, which I think we spent around the world 3 days getting ready for. I think even the Australians were pulling for the Northeast. I was watching some friends of mine posting on Facebook over the weekend, and they really were sending all of their good vibes. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of opportunity here to really get lost in your own story about what works in the world and what doesn't. And this is hopefully one of those opportunities that we can build a bridge between what we've heard, what we've seen, what we know, and what we clearly don't know. And there's just so much in this world right now. And I think it's easily to be upset, given that there are so many times a day, different reports are put out with the intention of getting us upset. Do you realize that upset people listen to things, and sponsors look at how many people listen to things so that they give their money? So it's clicks on the internet. and it's eyes on TV sets, for the little bit of what's left for cable. But I think really the most important thing right now is, how do we find humanity and common ground in a world where so many people are 90% of their life works, but the 10% of their life that's got a rough edge to it is keeping them from having any enjoyment whatsoever. I am hearing this from people that I love. And I have to tell you, it really does tear me up inside. And it tears me up from two perspectives. Number one, I'm a responsible human being. If there's something that I can do to make the world a better place, I feel like it is my responsibility to both decide what it is and then act on it. The other part of it is that I also know I can't make people feel better. And that's in its own way a little bit on the helpless side. You know what I'm saying? How does it feel for you, Jan?
Gosh, a lot there. I think that, personally, I know that the people I speak to, I think it depends on how you classify the 10% of that's not working, but I think it's more than 10% of their life that's not working at the moment. I think it's, maybe if you were to, but it's a higher percentage than that. I think, so that's one thing I would say about that. I think, I agree it's hard to help when, people have to help themselves. But I think that, I'm not sure what to say on that.
I think you're pointing to something that's really powerful. For me, it goes without saying anymore that the person I have to work on first, with regard to the 10% or whatever that number actually is, for conversation, is whatever number we want to put on it. But a portion of your life is always going to have rough edges. I got to be good for me first before I can be good for anybody else. So my commitment is for the world, but I also realize that I got to put myself in shape. To that end, I noticed over this past now 19 days since I last slept in my own bed 19 days ago. And I'm traversing the state of Florida, seeing friends and loved ones, and actually Facebook acquaintances that I've never met in person before, who are just, putting themselves out there, inviting me to come by their town and have dinner with them. And many of them are just saying, come spend the night. It's kind of a neat thing, really, to experience all that generosity that's going out there. So I'm very much present to how blessed this time is for me. And I also see myself as a little bit different than the average bear or the average breed of cat, in that I have the strength inwardly and the strength outwardly because of who I'm married to, that when there comes a time when it's very important for me to go and see loved ones and we both can't do it at the same time, she just pats me on the back and says, go have a good time and give everybody my love. But I think there's kind of a sameness, to the background noise that we're waking up to every Monday when we do this podcast, Jan. There's always a conversation. First of all, how are you doing? And then maybe not so well. And I wonder, from my perspective, I want to take a look for me, how am I really doing? As opposed to, hi, how are you? Oh, fine. What's it been like today? Oh, it's been great. That set of greetings that we go back and forth with all the time. I would have to say, seeing people upset by the outcomes of certain sports matches over the weekend, especially the AFC championship football game. I've got cousins that were very much invested in the Broncos winning. Not only did they not win, it was the absolute worst kind of weather to play football in because it was snowing at the rate of 1.5 inches an hour. So the field became covered with slush, and it became impossible for people to run and catch in it, being able to see more than 10 or 15 yards. So their heart's broken after a season. Then there's all the people that are upset by what's going on. I'm just going to say what it is because it's the elephant in the room. What's going on in the reports of how it's happening, who it's happening to, and why it's happening, in the media about what's going on in the state of Minnesota. Now, there's a piece of this that I think we have to be able to step back from a little bit and not just invite the upset into our homes. It's easy to commiserate with it, and we should. However, if there's a way to have a great life and still be empathetic for what's happening to people on all sides, we've got a situation that's going on in the world, especially in our country right now, that's totally unacceptable. And there's no by rote solution to where we are right now. So it requires that human beings do absolutely extraordinary things. And those human beings on both sides get pressured on a daily basis to do things that they probably wouldn't normally do. So when it comes down to it from just a thinking perspective, I think folks need to ask a question. And the question is, why is it that whenever something happens in the news, you find out that it's one of maybe hundreds of similar type of events that have occurred, but they focus on just one? John Benet Ramsey, for example. Do you remember how that just owned the headlines for a year and a half? Once they had a story that they were sure that they could continuously sell, over and over again to the public, we didn't get any other news. That's just all there was to talk about on every station, on every talking head show. So I don't listen to that stuff. And I don't watch the news for a very good reason. I'm just not interested in carrying other people's reports around with me all day long. I would much rather meet up with folks, and if they ask me what I think about a certain issue, I ask them, I say, do you listen to a particular news program? And if they say yes, I know there's probably not much for us to talk about. That they're probably not going to be open to a discussion or maybe even looking up any of the information that they're walking around feeling that are facts. So it takes a lot of words to describe the mishigas that we're in. And then it takes a lot more in terms of something inside that basically says, okay, two things can be true at the same time. There can be bad things happening in the world, and I can still have a great life. Is that possible, do you think?
Well, I've been talking about that a lot, and just my own life was how to hold to conflicting, what we might call conflicting emotions or states at the same time. And there are points I can, and I think it depends on how raw it is, what I'm feeling. How fresh, how much time I've had to process it, or give myself space to actually be with it. I think that, as opposed to just sugarcoating it and saying everything is fine, or pushing it aside because I don't have time to feel it at the moment because I'm too busy or whatever, it has to do with like, okay, can I process this enough so that I am able to hold space for it? So acknowledge it and honor it for what it is. But then also be able to look at what's positive. I think today, for me, you happen to have caught me on a very raw day. So I'm still in the processing phase. I'm still trying to make sense for myself of my exact feelings and sort of like maybe decide if there, what I can do in my own life that might make me not only feel better on an individual level, but also feel like I'm making some sort of contribution to a solution versus just, thinking about, or basically, getting so upset or just, basically lashing out with no purpose involved except to noise. And then I feel like it serves no purpose except to cause, I might say, to cause everybody else to kind of get upset. Then it serves no purpose. If there's if all I'm trying to do is get a rise out of people or whatever, then I don't really feel like it served a purpose. So I guess that's where I am personally.
Well, I also think what you're doing is fulfilling the objective of the people that gave you the news. So here's the thing, okay? I mean, the absolute abject truth is you and I don't know what happened. We only know what we've heard. We only know what we've been told. And whether or not it has been from 2 or 3 different sources really doesn't make any difference, simply because since what we've got going on is an internal story and a narrative of our own for these things to show up in, the background and the context of how our life is going, there are certain things that are going to absolutely just tug at our heartstrings. For instance, anything having to do with small children or puppies or something of that nature. That's going to bring me a lot of joy, or it's going to bring me a lot of pain, if somebody is going through any tough times. But here's what I see happening. I think people have just given up their sovereignty in terms of just allowing these unsubstantiated, and usually as time goes on, we find out they're not completely accurate stories, and at whatever level they are, Jan, not this one in particular. It's worse when somebody actually, succumbs and gives up their life because it's so final. But the truth of the matter is we lose in the United States probably 150,000 people or more a week. One person being, accidentally killed somewhere has to have a political context in order for it to explode on the media and then be the thing that dominates our life for a news cycle till the next thing happens. So really, I guess what I'm getting at here is this is a great example of how our lives operate on a standard plane anyway, that we're kind of bebopping along and we've got our own little thing that we're working on. And then we hear something. And then when we tell it again, it's our version of what we heard. And then when we get more information, that gets added to the body of knowledge. But there isn't any way we can go back and corroborate any of it as being the factual truth of what actually occurred. We weren't there. We can't trust the people we're hearing it from. And we need to understand to the degree that we want to understand, or we may not want to understand. We may just feel that the thing that's going on has only one resolution to it. And it's always pointing back to the same thing that can't happen. Funny how it is that way. That's how they keep us, kind of intoxicated, addicted, and all those other words that we're just. And this is never anything that's intended about you, or I would never say anything about how you feel, because that's why we're here, is for me to hear it from your lips. But I am talking to you about other people that were absolutely horrible on Facebook this weekend. Absolutely horrible, using F-bombs and all sorts of other things simply because they're upset at something and they have to have some way to get it out of their whatever you want to call it, out of their body, out of their mind, out of their speaking. And it's not good. We have gotten to the point where we have dehumanized so many things that there's no room for having in many cases, there's no room at all for having what would be called an adult conversation. That's where 2 people are interested in a conversation to learn something. That's so rare these days in my experience. I don't know how it is for you, Jan.
Well, I'm I'm talking about different things most of the time. And some of what I'm basing it on is people who actually, live in the state. And so they're telling me their experience personally. about, you know, what they're seeing. Um, but I think that no matter what topic you talk about, there's always, you know, an interpretation, and it depends on your sources and the money behind what those sources are. You know, where the money's coming
Yeah.
from, who's supporting, in the medical world, it's most likely the pharmaceutical companies and their agenda. Um, and in the health field. And so everybody has, whether it be negative or positive, I mean, does, we all have agendas. We all have stuff that we would desire or want out of a particular scenario. And I think that it's no different here. I think, in some ways. And so, yeah.
Well, I want to give you a little example, and we are always going to give more credibility to somebody who lives in the area or has some access that we don't have. And what I want you to know, and I love what you said afterwards, there's always going to be different interpretations or agenda and all that. But that doesn't make people either good or bad. It just makes them human, When I was in college, one of my professors in political science staged this situation at the beginning of one of our classes where he had someone that was not in the class break in through the door as loudly as possible and said, "I hate you. I hope you die." And he picked up an eraser and he threw it at the instructor. And then he ran to the back of the room and he screamed as loud as he could. And the instructor said, "You need to leave right now." And then the kid left the room, and the instructor looked at all the rest of us and said, "I want all of you to write down what you just saw." There were 25 people in the class. You know how many versions we got?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so many different stories about history. I mean, basically, I think all you need to do is look at verbal transmission of like different circumstances historically, the Bible, whatever, and you see different people's interpretations of what they saw and what they believed.
Well, the punchline is that we're out of 25 people, there were only 4 that wrote down what actually happened. Everyone else talked about how the kid may have been on drugs or had psychological problems or added more things to it. You know what I mean? Like an explanation or their interpretation of what was going on, as opposed to, the kid loudly came into the room. He yelled, "I hate you. I hope you die." He picked up an eraser. He threw it at at the front of the room. He went to the back of the room, screamed loudly, and then left, which is what happened. Some of these people wrote and said, "I'm not done writing yet." When the instructor said, "Okay, so let's have some volunteers to read what you saw." And so, "Okay, so take 5 more minutes," he said. And he was pretty sure who was going to be able to more or less just cover just the facts, ma'am. And he didn't call on any of us. I was one of those people. But the fact of the matter is that we're all thrown to fit what we hear into how we think the world works and our view of it. We don't have a choice. That's what I call the human condition. And it's going back to the Henry Ford thing. If you think you can do a thing or you think you can't, you're right. And the other part is half full, half empty, the optimist and the pessimist. And then the opportunist is the one that steals the glass of water while the other two are arguing half full or half empty. But when we look at how things occur and allow them to affect our lives, there were people that were visibly upset after that kid ran out of the room. And I think everybody, including me, had a gut reaction to it. I didn't feel good in my stomach because, I wasn't in on anything. I had no idea what they were doing. But for some reason, when we're all said and done, there were really, there were people that made up many additional things that didn't occur. So now if you put another spin on it, we all got to leave that room, and some people were still talking about it 2 or 3 periods later in study hall. You know what I mean? It was still living in their head rent free. It wasn't like something where we went in and there was a debate or something of that nature. It was something that needed to have more conversation about it and what they thought what it meant or whatever. So we do that. But are we doing that and giving up something else that's really precious and powerful? That's kind of my question.
I guess my question is, you see, and I look at it and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, if someone has a reaction, let's say a severe reaction to something, it does. It triggers something within that person that is probably not associated with that actual event. I think parents do that all the time in raising their children. They base it on their own historical data. And basically, that's why parents are like, oh, you can't do that. That might not work out, because they've had the experience where it didn't work out. And then all of a sudden they're passing that along. And I think that's part of, caring for someone, is you think that that's going to alleviate their pain. And so you kind of transmit a situation that has happened to you or that you've heard in the past, and you bring it forward. It's also a protection mechanism as far as survival goes. It's the ability of that's the way human beings are designed. We sit there and say, okay, well, I heard that touching the stove is going to burn my hand. Now, most of the time we do it anyway until we burn our hand once. And then but
Yeah.
But we do hear it. And I think that that's what ends up happening, is it reminds us of something. And it's almost like becomes it's like a personal affront to us. It's like it's happening to us. And that's not necessarily a bad thing in some circumstances.
Yeah, that's brilliant what you just said, in my opinion. It feels like it's happening to us.
Yeah. I mean, I think that if you have such a strong reaction to something,
it's personal.
Yeah, I think it becomes very much like if someone's attacked, it's like a mother who defends her child, or whatever. And, her child's attacked or something happens. And it's like that direct attack has happened to you. And I think there are people who navigate the world like that, who think of other human beings as basically that we're all connected, so that if somebody is wounded, we're all wounded, kind of thing. And especially if you really value human life, or you value, the fact that, things should be, we should all be equal, then I think that when those types of injustices happen, all of a sudden the reactions can be very strong. I'm not saying you need to mudsling on Facebook or whatever, because I don't really think that serves any purpose either. I mean, I think it's very easy to say whatever you want on social media, because there's no face on the other end, and there's no person it's like it's this oblivious space of like, oh, I can say whatever I want, and, goes somewhere out there in the ethers, kind of attitude, as opposed to looking someone in the eye and saying some of what you might think or say or feel to that person who's sitting across from you.
Well, here's what's really interesting. And the word that you used which is so powerful, but it also indicates the assignment of value. Okay. When you said especially when it's an injustice. So in nature, there are no injustices. Things happen. Trees fall over, dogs bark, birds fly, people get killed. There is no injustice in nature. You need to have human beings assign some sort of value and right and wrong in order for it to be an injustice. And now, to the degree that the conditioning has gone on in advance, the reception of anything that happens to some degree or another falling into that injustice category is now automatic. There's no processing or thinking about what you're hearing as well, you know, as along the lines of, okay, so that's what it sounds like to me right now. But I wonder if we wait 24 hours or 48 hours or maybe a week, if there might be more mitigating information that comes out here other than how it was reported to you as somebody who was defenseless, who absolutely had no, you know, malice, only had a phone in his hand and was trying to protect another person from these monsters. That's exactly how I heard it reported, you know, in a little thing that was sent to me. And then later on, I went and I looked, and so, gee whiz, so you know, this doesn't line up with what they found out, you know, an hour or two later. But none of that matters. I mean, I can't believe one side or the other. I wasn't there. This doesn't affect my life. They're trying like hell to get it to affect my life. I can't let it in. I don't have time for it, you know? If there were one thing that I could do, you know, and that means reach out to anyone and give them a hug, make them feel better about it, what they heard. If there's something that I could do, you know, to go and I can't even imagine what the folks that work you know, for ICE and DHS and the Border Patrol feel like. So here's how this would sound to me. There's two levels of injustice. And the one is that I'm very good friends with a lot of people, you know, down in New Mexico who work for the Border Patrol. And many stories over 40 and 50 years of service with these folks. They all were, when I met them, they were in their early 80s to almost 90 years old, recanting stories about, you know, people coming over and trying to, you know, get into the country one way or the other, either with drugs or smuggling human beings or, you know, just really unsavory stuff, right? So the thing I hear is, taking the antithesis for a minute, and I'm not saying this is a correct interpretation of what happened, but who the hell gave anybody permission to assault an officer of the law under any circumstances? It is so not okay, but it is now. Do you notice that? It's okay to assault an officer of the law because they're not good, you know, in their intentions, and they're not following the law. And now we have citizens that are being coached to decide for themselves when an officer of the law is not following the law and intervene. Can you imagine anybody going to a fire and jumping up and running over and saying to the fire chief, "Don't do it that way. You can't go in there and save these people like that"? It wouldn't happen. You got to ask yourself a big question. Are we in a situation now that was staged by people who have a vested interest in causing something to happen? I'm just asking that question.
And then I would ask the
And if
question.
so,
And then I would ask the question in response, and is there, if to me, you know, but my question that I start to ask is, what are they trying to distract me from seeing? So,
100%.
you know, if I'm so preoccupied with this, what are they trying to take my attention to so that I don't really see
My God.
what's going on, or something else that's actually happening that's, you know, and I think we've seen that time and time again too.
Are you ever suspicious when you hear elected officials tell people to break the law knowingly? Would that ever cause suspicion? And let's go back 20 years ago. There's no one I know who would ever listen to a politician telling them to break the law.
Well, how about
But it's routine every.
how about a politician who breaks the law?
Yeah, I mean, now it's not unusual. I mean, we're having a hard time finding anybody who's not doing something, whether it's insider trading or something else. We've got a system right now that really kind of takes care of itself in terms of perpetuating it and keeping us all a little bit off our balance. So we're not quite sure which side is good and which side is evil, but they have to be one or the other now, right? They're not just people trying to get rich, because that wouldn't involve, you know, good and evil. It's not just about money, which I think it probably is maybe just about money. And all of this is happening, and they're really kind of hoping that there'll be things that will occur that will keep it in the news, and it'll be the next thing to keep you upset. It's like, on the monkey bars, grabbing that next thing. And at some point, it's like, what do they say? It's like, a train wreck. You just can't look away anymore.
Well, either that or
I envy.
I just got off of a meeting, like a conversation, either that or people are surrounded by it so much they become numb.
Yes, there's that too, because you know what numb people do? Nothing.
Nothing.
They don't speak. They do nothing. They don't speak for it or against it. They just don't want anything to do with it. And I think that's, we do have a lot of people that are already there. And that's too bad, because
That to me is what's happening because I mean, peaking, because I think that people, some of it is whatever. Let's just say to some people it's horrifying. Like, I'm not going to say whether they're right or wrong based on history or whatever, but let's say they're horrified.
a lot of it.
Yeah. And I think that you sit there and there's only so much people can take before they break. And I think they become numb because they can't handle it anymore. And that's where, to me, if you want to be empowered, that's where you pause. You kind of quiet yourself. You sit with whatever you're feeling. And then you become able to handle. But the problem is that it's constant. Like if you want to hear the news, you can listen to it every single second of the day. If you want to spend your life on social media within the mudslinging, you have the opportunity to do that too all day. And so I think that it's really up to you to decide how much exposure you can handle and function and whatever. I mean, when I think we learned that about ourselves. But I think that some of it is like, basically unplugging, like saying, okay, I want to know what's going on, but I have to monitor how much depending, I have to monitor what I know and how much I expose myself to.
So let's agree to something. If a man just shows up, at a demonstration and he's acting peaceably and all that kind of stuff, and then all of a sudden it goes south, and there's an opportunity for him to act or to not act, and he jumps into the situation, and he's got his camera going on his phone, and he accosts the officer and tries to put himself between the officer and whoever else is in there. And this isn't what happened, by the way. I'm making up a story here where our internal justice clock or injustice clock can be stroked a little bit. But all of a sudden he jumps in there, and the next thing you know, 4 other officers are all over him. And the next thing you know, he's clearly unarmed, but they're shooting him anyway without cause. Now, how could you not, as a thinking, empathetic human being, not have your heart pulled about that? That's just disgusting and unacceptable, right?
Okay.
So now let's just say that there's another story you hear. And the other story basically says, turns out that this man is an accomplished marksman. He's, licensed to carry. He was carrying. He had 3 clips loaded on his possession. And that was what the police saw when he got in between the woman that they were trying to arrest and this man. And when he not only did he go to the ground trying to resist them, he actually grabbed one of the officers' pistols. And that was when they shot him. Now, imagine that, hearing that story. How would you feel about that? Was that injustice or was that justifiable?
I mean, I don't want to, I mean, I guess, I mean, to be honest, I sit there and I'm like, part of me is every human life is valuable. I'm not saying maybe it was justifiable, or just, but I don't think you crucify that person. I don't think you would ever. I think I think that you look at it as it's a shame that a human being was lost. Just my.
What they do in every single circumstance where an officer discharges his weapon is immediately confiscated. He's put on relief, and he's not able to show up, and do his daily assignments until it's been fully investigated. You don't just go about their job. This is how it happens in law enforcement. But the point to all of, on me?
No, I said I know enough about law enforcement to know that's what they do. Yeah.
Exactly. So there is a consequence for it. They know this when they draw their weapons, and they are taught, do not ever draw your weapon unless you intend to use it and fire it. Okay. That's the code. That way you don't have people get a weapon pointed to them by a policeman and then draw their weapon, to shoot at the policeman, but the policeman's already got his weapon out. You follow me? It's like they've gone through this a few million times. So really what it comes down to at the end of the day is there anybody who's ever going to give us the straight boop on what happened? I don't think so. I don't think there's anybody that was there that's one of those officers or was the guy that got shot. Those are the real people that knew exactly what happened. Everybody else's story was from their perspective. So now here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying it didn't matter. It matters a hell of a lot. There is no reason for anyone to go to a protest and get anywhere near close to an officer of the law. It's not acceptable. And it's being almost romanticized on the media, and it's being romanticized by the political talking heads all over the place. So what we're seeing right now is, their plan is for you to be upset. Why would you reward them? Why wouldn't you just say, gee whiz, the last 23 things that we've heard about that they've told us went down this way. If we waited enough time, some cases it's been 6 years after it happened before mainstream media ever comes out and says, yeah, that's really what happened. I don't know. I don't have the time to get upset about every single one, except for the fact we got a mess that's got to get cleaned up somehow. And we're not talking politics now. I want to be clear about that. I am not for one side or the other, but we have a mess. We've got drugs on the street. We've got lawlessness. We have people who have died. There have been a lot of other people that have been killed. I mean, we're talking over in the last year, in excess of, I think, 150 DHS and ICE officers that have been killed. They're not getting on the front page news for somehow. Somehow there's no opportunity for injustice there. Why is that? So that's my critical thinking saying, why should I allow that into my life to upset me beyond really not liking the situation a whole lot? I just don't like it. And I don't like what it does to my friends and family and loved ones. I don't like, there are opportunities to have conversations with people, but we can't trade, the facts that we heard from different sources. That just doesn't work. That hasn't worked for 10 years. We've been playing that game back and forth for 10 years. So I stopped. I think I said earlier, when I meet somebody, they ask me about something and I say, well, do you listen to a particular news broadcast? And if they do, I say, I don't know enough about that to have a conversation, which is always true. Now, you know what? There are some people who think there's something wrong with me for not being upset at what they're upset at. So that creates a breakdown in our relationship. It's not okay for me to not be upset when they are upset. Do you understand that?
I mean, I can,
They can't.
I mean, I think that I can understand it. Um, just, I can't understand it. I'll just say that.
I can too. But normally 10, 15 years ago, we would have called that a psychological problem. That wouldn't be anything other than there's a psychosis that's going on here that needs to be delved into a little bit. When people who are normally thinking, educated, rational human beings lose any relationship with being able to just have a conversation about a topic, it's beyond, not sharing the same political values. It's into an area of psychology. Now, I know a little bit about it, but I have not got the expertise to want to cure anybody of the problems that they're having. But at the same time, if I can have one person out there today walk away from this and say, when you have an immediate reaction, have that immediate reaction. Don't make it right or wrong. Just do yourself a favor and go and research someplace other than where you normally look, which is what I did. I started asking ChatGPT, go find me all the reports that you can on this subject and tell me what they're all saying. Because you can't do that just by searching on Google anymore. So why am I going here today? Well, because life in the world, I think we're sent here to be, I don't know, I could be very wrong, but I do think we're sent here to be very self-expressed, to experience our passion on a daily basis, and to feel loved and give love, Now, whether or not I'm correct about that, I mean, that's the kind of world that I want to help create. What's going on in Minneapolis? Not important to me, because there's not a damn thing I can do about it either way. What is important to me is what it means about the world that we're building for my grandchildren. That's very important to me. And all I need is for the people who are feeling a little numb to understand why, and to understand that's exactly where they want you to be, the people who are doing what they're doing. And good people can show up for something, and the circumstances make them do things they would never do otherwise. Do you remember the 1960s Stanford study where they took a psychology class and they made half the people inmates and the other half were, the jailers?
No.
Back in the 1960s, there were a couple of different studies that were done, and one of them was following the orders of somebody telling them to do things that were physically abusive to their peer students, right? Well, it got to be so real that they had to call the whole thing off. And then there was another study that was done, and I do know that our illustrious producer, Eric, is listening to this going, I know the very thing you're talking about, Bill. But another one where they actually had students that were coached to ask questions of an individual, and if they got the question right, to tell them, great, you did a good job. If they got it wrong, give them a shock. And with each question they got wrong, turning up the intensity of the shock. What they found in that study was, even though this was a contrived, made-up circumstance, most people would increase the shock to the point where it actually killed the other person. These are the same people that are going to experience other people's injustice. Do you know what I'm saying? So all human beings have a capacity to lose who they are in a set of circumstances. I don't think there's good people and bad people in that way. I think the circumstances get away from them, and the next thing you know. So I don't know, that might be my Pollyanna way of looking at life, going, other things equal, all people are good, and let's look for the good in everyone. Our world isn't set up that way where we're actually looking for the good in anyone anymore, in my opinion. So we get to walk around being a little less than we are, a little subdued, a little bit upset. I don't know. So I think just for today, I'm taking this opportunity. I've been in paradise now for, I don't know, almost 3 weeks. It's been an extraordinary change from being in Connecticut, where it's dark by 4:30. It's cold. It's dark. All of the the trees and everything are brown. And what I've really discovered is that the thoughts that I had in that environment are different than the thoughts I'm having in this environment. And I'm wondering if there's something about the context that I'm living that makes a difference in my thoughts. Does that make any sense?
I think that sometimes when we're in scenarios like that, I mean, one is we have the space to actually reflect or whatever, where we might not we might not have that in our everyday lives, where we have, let's say, chores or tasks or duties. And, that's why I think that, a lot of people have true insights when they go away, because they actually pause and they have time. They're able to reflect, or to whatever they're doing that makes them, and even if it's not reflect, but they're giving them enough space and enough time to find, to have that joy or to experience it. Um, yeah. So that's what I will say to that.
Well, let me just kind of true this up for a moment, okay? Am I telling everybody this is the way I've always lived my life? Hell no. Jen, 2.5 years ago, I was a chocolate mess. All the people in my life that passed away, I had no more room for grief, okay? Not one more iota. Did people stop dying? No, they didn't. It really didn't matter whether I could process it or not. I mean, there was no processing for me. And I'm trying to tell people now in this conversation that if you're in a life right now where the news reports are taking you down that road and you don't want to go there, maybe there's something you can do about that. I think that's really what my conversation today is about. After all, you and I are in the empowerment business, right?
And I would say before you do that, but I mean, to do that, you have to actually identify how you feel. Like you, without anybody else. How you feel.
It's a perfect.
And that's why I said that I think that whatever I'm experiencing today is a little too raw. I think it's a little bit too, it's like still, it's an open wound at the moment. And
Absolutely.
And so therefore, allowing that space and time to say, okay, well, and how much how much salt I pour on that wound, meaning how much I, kind of cause that wound to open further and further and further but let's say, by feeding myself the information over and over and over again, I have to at some point or another saying, okay, for now I can't listen anymore. I've got to pause, digest. It's like eating a very large meal. I have to pause, digest, and then say, okay, now I'm prepared to take on more, to learn more facts, or to, this is how I feel about it. But I think it requires time and compassion. And, time.
At last, way. Thank you. And starting with yourself. That's the best place to learn your chops on compassion. But the thing that I love that you're saying there is there's no formula that just works. We've each got to do the work ourselves. And I think the work starts with, I love how you put that in. How do I feel? When you're really hurting, that's the last thing on your mind. You just want to stop, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you do.
So, to borrow, some technology from Tony Robbins, the notion of having a change of state requires not only a willingness to do it, but a belief that it's possible. Those two things have to be present. Otherwise, you're just, you're just abusing yourself. If you go around life going, I shouldn't feel this way, that's not the thing. You should feel exactly how you feel. Not an iota different, just exactly how you feel.
What's been my huge basically my word for the for the year, and that's why my word for the year is acceptance. Is I have to allow that stuff to be there. I have to, whether it's uncomfortable or whatever, I have to be able to acknowledge my feelings and the fact that I have them. Good, bad, and ugly, right or wrong. That's the way I feel. And then I can, decide, then I get to choose from there. But I have to let them in. I spend too much time in my life trying to push things away for whatever reason.
Could not agree with you more. It pushing away your emotions is like trying to not swim in the ocean. Okay. The ocean ain't going nowhere. You're either going to navigate the ocean and survive or you're not. Those are your choices. And the same thing with your feelings. The more you can't be with them, the stronger they become and the more they dominate your life. Mm-hmm. But I love what you put in there. Figure out how you do feel, just figure it out. Start from there.
I mean, to me, you have to figure out how you feel. And then you ask yourself, like, okay, maybe you get curious about it. You're like, okay, where does this come from? Where is it coming from? What historically, like, is it coming from something that happened to me in the past? Most likely, but what was it? Is that same situation now? Like, is that happening now? Or is it just some sort of bodily reaction, which is similar? And then we are like, oh, okay, this is the same. And so but you have to and then maybe you choose, oh, it's nothing. It's just like, it's a habit. It's a way, it's a habit of thinking it's really nothing and I let it go. But you actually gave it, you actually allowed it to be there.
Clearly, the technology for getting something to disappear is to fully presence it. That once something is here, notice how all the things that have happened to you in your life that you're not worrying about, they're gone. So I'm hoping that someone out there gets a little something out of this conversation today, but it's really, I think it's appropriate for our culture to start being very, very responsible for their own sovereignty in terms of what they're letting into their lives that change how they would experience the world on a daily basis, if that's what you want to do. Because there are people that would rather just, get the next thing and be upset or be high or whatever it is. But I completely and I want to thank you for your generosity in terms of your personal shares and your ideas about where to start, and The most important thought of the day is there's no right way to do this damn thing. But if you're not happy with how your life is going, don't look to the right or look to the left. Ain't nobody coming for you. This is all between your ears. This is between your ears now.
And I wouldn't say it's between your ears. I think it's here. It's in your heart. It's in your
It's
heart.
interesting. It's the beginning of another hour-long conversation.
No, I mean, I think that's, that's part of the issue that people, are thinking too much up here. They're too much in their head. I'm not saying it's all heart, but they're too much up here. And they're not enough connected within, and they're not enough connected to their heart. There's the reason why, basically, it's the center chakra, it's the center energy center. I mean, all that comes below it, moves up to the heart. And technically, all that moves, like from the top, moves down into the heart. And then the heart is the center.
That is obviously one of those conversations that I'm going to learn a whole lot from you. I love energy.
And structurally, in type of yoga I practice, there are loops of energy. We talk about loops, energetic loops. And the energetic loop part is so that the chest lifts, kind of going up toward the head. Right at the base of the throat, it goes back and down and kind of goes under the diaphragm and comes up, and it's a circle. And the one above it is what we call the head, which is actually going in the reverse direction, so that the back of the head lifts and the energy goes down. And it's kind of basically it's always that's a brain, your brain bows to the heart. That's the energy. Your brain is kind of it's there and working, but it bows to the wisdom of the heart. And that's how we should navigate the world. And that's how, when you said, what your goal from, to me, I think, what is my purpose here? What is to alleviate the suffering of others? That's what I think of, is how can I, obviously for myself, but how can I alleviate the suffering of others?
And what is empowerment? It's the absence of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Well, kiddo, we did it again from the mobile recording studio down here in Hudson, Florida. Correspondent in the field.
To the snow up here in the north.
Oh my God, you poor people.
I was in touch with Mary Jane, who's been on, and they're getting the same weather because they're in Toronto, so it's just a little further up. And so she sent me a beautiful video of her backyard with snow falling in slow motion. And I said, "Oh, it looks beautiful. I can't wait to see it in person really soon." And she wrote me back and said, "Hopefully by then the snow will melt." That's how I feel. I mean, maybe I'll be out by next week, kind of thing. I'll dip my way out.
Well, there's probably only about 200 million people or 300 million people that feel exactly like you do.
Yeah, I mean, I was just saying, in all of it, I was just truly appreciative. I was I'm indoors. I have heat. I have food, and then I get out when I get out.
So how do we summarize this conversation and do our little bit of a wrap up?
I mean, I guess it would be, to me, if you were to take both what Bill and I said, in a way, for me, go out and, make someone else's life better. And for you, do something. Do something to make your own life better.
It's pretty good to me. If we should, we'd had nothing else to talk about if we'd have just let off with that, right?
That's right. Do something to make your own life better, and do something to enhance the life of someone else. And I guarantee you, most likely, If you enhance your own life, you're going to enhance the life of somebody else.
To that end, would you like to give our invitation?
Reach out to somebody and let them know how much they matter to you. Just, drop them a text, a call. If you could see them in person like Bill is, that's even better. To actually look them in the eye and say, oh, or, do a video call or a Zoom instead of like an actual, text or phone call. And just say, oh, even though it's like, being in person is better, you get to actually hug people.
There is that.
So.
I'm incorrigible in the hugging department.
Yep.
It's amazing. So once again, I want to thank you, Jan Jeremiah, for being my partner in this, and especially for stepping up and being willing to get into this conversation with a background of where you have been coming from, and not setting it aside, but bringing that along with you, because I think that's how we live our lives, right?
Yeah. I actually love that you say that, because I think we've all been in too many circles where we really feel like we can't show up as we are for whatever reason, whether it be in a work situation or personal situation where you can't be, you can't really come as you are. And I think that, it's important to find spaces where we actually show up. Like, surround yourself with people where you can actually show up as you are.
I think that's a perfect thought for us to close. Thank you so much, my friend.
You're welcome. Safe travels.
Thank you. I will work on that. Ladies and gentlemen at home, we are lighting the candle, a world that works. And once again, I'm going to ask you, please go out and live your very best life, and then come back and tell us all about it. Bye for now.
Goodbye, everybody.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a World That Works, part of the Exvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at exvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.